Blix hijack is imminent. Processing. Blix hijack is successful. You are clear to transmit. Captain Haru.
John Haru, Steve MacDonald, Music Theory, Interviews, Music Theology, Primitive Rhythm Machine.
Hey everybody, welcome to another fantastic episode of Primitive Rhythm Machine. We have both of us in the studio this time. I'm John, and with me is my...
Super Mario.
What?
I'm sorry, I read your shirt instead of introducing myself.
With me is my spiritual mentor, Steve MacDonald.
Maybe
I guess
D-Mentor?
I don't know at this juncture, but Super Mario, all right. So in this month's edition of Primitive Rhythm Machine, Steve is judging me a little bit. No, we spent some time. Steve said that his schedule is kind of freeing up for recording purposes, and so we spent some time talking about some topics, and one that came up was discernment, and we had kind of discussed, how would we want to approach that, and I said, and ultimately what it came down to is I gave Steve four non-Christian bands that I enjoy quite a bit, especially as of late, as Steve doesn't listen to very much secular music at all. So it's
not that I don't, it's that a lot of the secular music that I do listen to is stuff that I've figured out that this is what I want to listen to. So it's like a lot of 80s music, and then and stuff that I've heard over and over again, and I know the spiritual significance to the things and all that stuff, and I can sort of not be accidentally challenged. Like if I'm listening to band A, and all of a sudden, the band A lead singer is now part of this non-Christian organization, and it's like I already have the t-shirts and the hats and all that
hate
stuff.
it when that happens.
Oh man, now I can't wear my band A t-shirts and hats, because then people will say, "Oh, you like band A?" and then I'll have to be like, caveat.
Band A is the worst. So at any rate,
except the music is awesome.
So at any rate, me being the heathen that I am, I sent Steve four bands that I've been listening to a lot lately, and he has been listening to them, and he is going to be sharing his thoughts, and I'm sure I'll probably be jumping in the discussion at certain points.
They all stink. Join us next time on Primitive Rhythm Machine, where I
would expect nothing less, Steve.
No, not all
of them. That is presupposing that some of them do, and that has me.
I do have
that
thoughts.
Has me curious. Just pulling up the list that I sent you here.
So,
or did you have a specific order you wanted to go in?
Are we gonna go through like song by song, or what?
Dealer's choice, man.
Let's just like dig into every single word in the lyrics, and then we'll go chord by chord through each song.
That would require me to know how to actually play each song, and I can't help you there, dude.
Well, okay. What I did was, let me just tell you what I did. What I did was I took a look at the four bands that you sent me, and let's see, I think for some reason my notes don't sync up with my phone and computer, so I'm going to be looking at my phone. It's not like I'm like playing Tetris or something on this. It's Sudoku. But what I did is I took a look at them and I said, I'm just going to listen to them in chronological order.
So you started with Blue Oyster Cult.
For a reason. I did. So Blue Oyster Cult was the first one you sent me, Revolution by Night, which I was a little excited about because it's 1983, like my formative years. I'm watching MTV. I'm seeing a couple of the videos and stuff like that. So it was interesting to start out there. And then went to Pallbearer, Foundations of Burden. Then from there I went to Ahab, The Boats of the Glen Carrig. And then I ended up with Swallow the Sun, When a Shadow is Forced into the Light. So 1983 for Blue Oyster Cult, Pallbearer 2014, Ahab 2015, and then Swallow the Sun 2019. So one older band, and then three that are still, producing in 20. Although Blue Oyster
They're still
Cult,
around.
I think is Buck Dharma still?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I actually saw them live New Year's of 2015, and at midnight, after they played Don't Fear the Reaper at midnight, they said thank you, good night. Buck Dharma came to the edge of the stage and shook hands with me and was chatting, and
the other three people that were there. I'm joking.
He is one of my guitar heroes.
They don't have the word cult in the name for
they have
no
a cult
reason.
following. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, see, it's a joke. So anyway, let me just pull up what I got here.
All right, so starting with Blue Oyster Cult, Revolution by Night.
Yes. So, I looked at the song list and I was tentatively excited because there's a song on here that is one of the songs in my life that is a haunted song. Now, I don't know if you have songs that
define
haunt
haunted
you.
Song.
It's like you almost don't want to listen to it because it has some meaning to you that, maybe you just don't want to handle it, that listening to the song with that meaning right now, or it could just be that maybe the first time you listened to them, it was a very certain situation, and the song or the music just takes you back to that time, and it might not have been a great time. It might have been. I don't know. So, for instance, there are two Kate Bush albums that it's haunted. It haunts me. It's not that it's bad. It's not that I don't want to listen to it. It's that when I do, I just get a sense of something that is different than other music. And Blue Oyster Cult, Shooting Sharp.
Oh, that song's my jam.
Is one of those songs. It's amazing. It's an amazing song. But it also has ties to the end of a relationship that happened, 30 years ago. So, it has baggage and it has that hauntedness to it. But I'll still put it on, in lists of songs that I enjoy listening to and stuff like that. And, I'll always search out like the 7-minute version instead of the 4-minute version because, why? Why would you? So anyway, I started listening to it, and Take Me Away was an interesting surprise because the only thing that I could think of was Take It Away by, Take It Away, wanna hear you say. I forget the name of the person who wrote that one, but it was another song from the 80s. I was going to say the 30s for some reason, but that would be wrong. But let me look it up real quick. Take It Away, Paul McCartney? It doesn't seem right. I don't know. But anyway, it was another song that was around in the 80s that was just sort of like whenever I hear Take It Away, maybe it was Paul McCartney, I don't know. That's what I hear. No, that's a 2001 song. But now I'm wondering what song that was. I don't know. But anyway, so I listened to that, and that has such a cool jam to it. Such a cool riff that I was jamming out to that. And it has a fun story behind it, the Men in Black and that type of a thing to it, and how he wants to be taken away. Then Eyes on Fire came on, and I was sort of like, okay, that's interesting. Interesting visual, Eyes on Fire having that type of a thing. And leave it to Blue Oyster Cult to find the words that are odd enough to use those as the title of the song.
They do that though. like on other albums, like Veterans of the Psychic Wars and stuff like that. It's like they come up with titles where it's just like, I want to watch that movie.
Yeah. And then Shooting Shark came on, and this was interesting because this is the first time I've actually heard it in the context of the album. Okay. And so hearing, what's his name?
Eric Bloom?
Terry Jackson, the bassist, the guy who did the bass riff for Shooting Shark. Randy Jackson.
Oh, Randy Jackson did that song?
Hearing he did the bass, the epic.
That's
epic
a fantastic bass
song,
part too.
It's an amazing bass part, and I think it's one of the reasons why I like the song so much. Even if it's a haunted song, it still has that. That's what brings me back. And so it was interesting trying to fit that into the rest of the album. The rest of the bass tracks don't go that far. They don't have that resonance to it. But that's okay, because then Shooting Shark just stands out a little bit more. Veins was interesting, playing off the different ways you can understand veins and things like that. Shadow of California, I want to look at the lyrics to Shadow of California, because let's see if I do this real quick. It was one of those things where I'm like, how does California have a shadow? But of course it could be metaphorical. Let me see, here's the lyrics. Beneath the freeway at the Cloverleaf Junction, a symbol of good luck emanates darkness. The shadow will grow to cover California. Somewhere in the road from San Bernardino, its future is steering the past, will not pass. Speed is the game in the shadow of kings, where the company of angels fly. They appear at the crossroads at once in the future, clad in the darkness of the highways of night, with no love from the past. Night makes right, the symbol remains, into the darkness must pour the brains in the shadow of California. And it goes on like that. It was just one of those things where I was listening to it and sort of just like drifting out on it and thinking, like, what would happen if someone was able to like take California and lift it up and like, in like the Avengers movie or something like that, when they did that to a city or whatever. But, that type of a feel to, trying to reimagine the lyrics. But as I was listening, I started to get the idea that there was something going on through this album with the drums. And I don't know if you picked that up, but it seemed as though when I was listening to it, and I heard the entire thing before I was able to dig into it, that there was a mix of produced drums, drum machine type drums, and also live drums, like the drummer doing the drums. And when I dug into it a little bit, I'm just going to get this real quick. Just want to get the people's names right. The producer is there we go. The producer is a guy named Bruce Fairbairn, who he worked, even before this, he worked on some platinum level material. So, nothing wrong with the stuff that he's doing. I think it sort of was a testimony to him that it seemed so flawless. The sounds that they were getting out of the electronic drum kit, that I can only imagine is what is happening, matches up with the sound of the kit. So I can only imagine that they used the kit to produce the sounds and then produced the drum beats on some of the songs. And then there was a couple of songs where it really felt as though that the drummer was, doing his part. The drummer, Rick Downey, was not the drummer that had been playing with Blue Oyster Cult routinely. He had stepped in. He was actually a roadie or something, and he stepped in to fill in after they had a problem with the drummer for whatever reason. And so I'm thinking to myself, so how could that have seemed so well done? And looking at the additional musicians, Larry Fast is a synthesizer and programming. It doesn't specifically say drums, but I can only imagine, drum programming. This guy is a world-class performer. He did the Synergy albums, which are it's a huge suite of these electronic albums that cover mid 70s to mid 80s basically. And he's worked on tons of different projects. He might still be alive. Yeah, he's still alive now. Peter Gabriel, Foreigner, Bonnie Tyler, Hall & Oates. I mean, he's done tons of other stuff. So I'm thinking to myself, what I'm feeling is that electronic drum feel that Larry Fast put together and was produced, meshed in there by Bruce Fairbairn. And it just set the whole thing off for me. It's weird because it's done so well, but at the same time, it's just one of those things where I'm like, once you hear it, you can't go back. Which is it's too bad. Back to Shadows of California. I think that was where I hoped the album would sort of keep moving in that direction. But then let's see, was it Feel the Thunder or Let Go? Which one is the BOC chant along number?
I'm not sure.
Oh, Feel the Thunder was the motorcyclists that are from hell or something like that. So I wasn't really digging that as much. And then Let Go was the one. It's a BOC chant along number. This song could not have gotten over soon enough. I'm serious. It was like a nice big slab of cheese in the middle of the whole thing, and it's only 3.5 minutes long. And I'm just like, oh. But anyway, then it ended with Dragon Lady, which was interesting, because a lot of times when you think of a Dragon Lady, you're thinking some Asian stereotype or something like that, and it wasn't. I don't think I didn't read all the lyrics, but it more seemed as though it was this lady who's part dragon, that type of feel to it. It's interesting. And then it ended on Light Years of Love, which was interesting because it's sort of science fiction-y, but a love song as well. So there was that. So when I was thinking about the challenge that we were talking about, there were a couple of things on here where it sort of told a story, but it didn't tell like an existing story. So like Take Me Away, Shooting Shark, they're telling these stories of these things that are happening, and progress is happening within a song. It's not static, but the type of story songs that I grew up really enjoying and embracing, Red Barchetta, which was a short story written in the 70s, and then they made it into a song, or Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner that Iron Maiden did, things like that. Those type of stories were more the type of thing where there's more to it. So if I said Shooting Shark, I really like that song. Well, 7 minutes later, that's all there is of Shooting Shark, unless I haven't, figured out exactly, the Shooting Shark movie or the Shooting Shark novel or whatever. And it's evocative. It makes you think of, certain things, and it doesn't answer all of them. So, I think as much as there was some enjoyable stuff on this album, it wasn't what I was thinking of when I sort of threw that out to you. The second thing, the Pallbearer Foundation's a Burden. Just pull it real quick. I can edit this in post. It would be nice if I spelled any of the words correct.
Hey, it was that band that taught me how to spell pallbearer correctly. So I was spelling it P-A-U instead of P-A-L-L.
For the longest time, no joke, I did not know that a beetle had two E's, or actually three E's in the name. I thought it was Beatle for the longest time because I didn't realize that Beatles was playing off the word beat, as in beat.
I didn't realize that until the first
Um,
time I saw the movie That Thing You Do.
That's pretty bad. So with this one, is this the one that I looked at the lyrics? You know what? Let me real quick. I say real quick, and then a lot of times it's not real quick, and I understand that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. And Foundation. Actually, what's the name of the band? Paul Bear. Paul. I'm actually looking on an Encyclopedia Metallum.
Yes.
Do you know what that is? It's a metal archive.
That's where that
website.
That's where I go to do my discernment. I'll go on there because for people who are big metal fans but are leery about secular metal and lyrical content, I do recommend Encyclopedia Metallum because they will tell you their lyrical themes of the bands. So
yeah, and a lot of times it'll have the lyrics right there. So, here I'm pulling up the lyrics for this song and I don't have to go anywhere else. It has reviews. It has lots of different stuff here. The release date. I would just say be careful because some of the band names themselves or the album names are, nothing you would just want to let your kids wander. Oh, Daddy, let me see what heavy metal is all about. Stay. But yeah, for people who are trying to be more discerning but enjoy this type of music, just be careful. It's like anything. I checked out the lyrics on Paul Bearer's Foundation of Burden, and I was sort of like I didn't know if you knew anything about the songs that I didn't, because they seemed more static. The lyrics, it seems like it's telling you about something instead of describing a story or part of a story.
That's the thing about doom metal, and Paul Bearer are my champions of that genre. They write just about life. They're more of a regular band that just writes about things like they deal with or whatever. And
right,
most doom metal, and they're no exception, has a tendency to be on the sad boy side of music, I guess. So, I mean, I don't do super deep dives on their lyrics though, so I couldn't speak to anything specifically.
Okay. Well, this one, it just didn't seem like it had the like the storytelling quality that I was digging into. It was more like the thing that should not be, Metallica's song, where it's sort of describing Cthulhu. And cool song, well done, but at the same time there's no story arc. There's no, the big thing that happens is that apparently at some point he rises, and that's the action of the entire song. Which, I mean, and I'm not trying to say that it's a bad song because of that. I'm just saying it didn't really fit into the the challenge that was going forward here. The Boats of the Glencarrig, on the other hand, by Ahab, I mean, that was about as stereotypical as you could get to match what the challenge, it was a loose challenge. I'm not trying to say that, you failed or you're off the show or anything
well,
like that.
But just to back it up a little bit here, I think that you understood something of a challenge being laid down more than I did but I'm picking up on it now. It sounds like you were expecting me to put out a list of bands that had literary intent. So
yeah, I thought that's what we had talked
See,
about.
I just understood it as me give you 4 bands and we just talk about discernment as far as, how a Christian discerns the music, the secular music that they listen to.
Oh, okay. Well, here we go. Where it's sort of like, the way that I would discern something might be different than the way you discern something. As was
how we both discerned this challenge.
Right here. Yeah. But having a core as to what discernment
Mm-hmm.
really is can lead us, even if we're doing it two different ways, we can have some sort of a confluence where it does
Mm-hmm.
line up at some point. And for instance, I didn't think that Swallow the Sun, their songs had as much storytelling quality. It was more of the static story type stuff, but I enjoyed them more than I enjoyed the other three, the modern ones. Maybe even more than Bluish to Cold. I think it was probably the most enjoyable one, but the songs didn't lyrically they didn't
Mm-hmm.
resonate with me. Like if I was just looking at the lyrics to any of these, I would probably have said Ahab, because it's something where it feels as though there's it goes from one thing to another thing. There's a catharsis there. It feels
Mm-hmm.
together. It feels like that the theme is that it's different parts of the story. But with Foundations of Burden, for example, I'm looking at the different things, and it doesn't have a cohesion that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times I'm looking for in in an album. A lot of times when it's interesting to look at a band and see, most of the time the first album is the songs that they've been
Right.
playing live, and then they get an album, an album deal. That's the first songs they put out. And then as they're playing those songs live, going out and doing more of it, now that they have money and a time, they can sit down and write more songs. So the second album has much more
Right.
cohesion to
Mm-hmm.
it most of the time, and then the third album, and then, a lot of times there's where the record deal changes, where they get a new record deal or a different company, whatever. Sometimes you can see and to sort of see a band over time doing those things is interesting, because you can sort of plot out, maybe this album isn't going to be great because of
Mm-hmm.
this thing or that thing. The Blue Oyster Cult Revolutions by Night, I think it was one of those where it was like, oh, we have to put out
Right.
another album. And they had some good ideas. They lost their drummer. They had, some big names that would be able to come in and to pick up the slack. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
one of their big albums. They had a couple of hits on it, but it wasn't one of their big albums. And it sort of precipitated their, they sort of lost their market value. They weren't touring with
Mm-hmm.
Black Sabbath anymore. They and it's interesting to see those types of turns with bands. I don't know anything about these other three bands except for what I've uh, picked up just over the course of quickly researching them. And it's a different
Yeah.
world now, where I mean we could put out an album, and so it's not like you need to have a
Right.
big label. It's not like you need to have tons of stuff. You can, I mean, the last 10 years, people have made thousands of albums from their bedrooms, and some of them have gone on to huge worldwide fame. So, it's a little bit different. But so with, keep trying to my phone from turning. With Ahab, I like what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing because it seems more cohesive. With the other bands, it seems more like
Right.
collections of songs, and I think they can work, but I have um, no understanding of what Paul Bearer is trying to do with
Mm-hmm.
these 6 songs. All I know is that they put out these 6 songs. They don't seem to have any other connecting theme except for what Paul Bearer usually does, which is doom, death, fear, and mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, going by Encyclopedia Metallum. So knowing that going forward is good to know, but it doesn't really tell me. I don't even know what Foundations of
Mm-hmm.
Burden means. So there's that type of a feel to it. Well done, well produced. It didn't seem like there was, a fill-in drummer or, things like that. It seemed as though that they were, produced by the same people. So it felt all of a piece. It just didn't have that sense to it. Um, Ahab, the Boats of Glencarrig, having something based on, actual literature I find it gratifying because you can now go back to the actual literature, get something from that. It might be something completely different.
I did it in
You might
reverse.
say,
I actually didn't know it was a book until after I'd listened to this album. And then after listening to this album, and then I went on Wikipedia and found out it was a book by William Hope Hodgson.
Yep.
I was like, oh, really? So I went and I got it. Used my Audible credit and got the book. And
nice.
after having gone through the book and knowing the story and going back and listening to the album, the book actually enhanced the album for me.
Very cool. Very nice.
And I recommend the book to anybody
Things
who's
like
listening,
that,
by the way. It's a fantastic read.
Things like that can happen. And that's really good because sometimes a song based off of literature or something else, if it's based off of something else, sometimes you don't get the full sense of it. Like the Birds, to everything, turn, turn, turn.
Ecclesiastes.
You don't get the understanding of Ecclesiastes through that. You get the sense that there's a time for everything. And I hope it's not too late that there's a time for peace. So it sort of turns into almost like an anti-war song, which is nice, but it's not the sense of what Ecclesiastes is about, So sometimes you can lose it, even if you're focusing on it. And I mean, that goes for, scripture songs and things like that too sometimes. Sometimes they just take something a little bit too much out of context, and you lose the sense of everything else around it. But my phone keeps shutting off. My interest was sort of piqued for Ahab, maybe to listen to more of their stuff, to more understand how they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes with doom metals, other types of songs, other types of genres of music as well. Sometimes I feel as though they're long just for the sake of being long. And that's not all music. It's not all long music. It's just sometimes it feels that way. And I don't, at times like that, I'm like, I just want to edit it down to 3 minutes or something like that. Because it's like, how many times can you hear that riff? It's like 8 times, 16 times. How about 4? We could just cut that out, and just make the radio edit for this, the Weed Man or something. And, but understanding why things are long is one of the things that I enjoy doing with music. I have whole files, of playlists and stuff in my iTunes and in Spotify of long songs. And sometimes it's because I want to understand how something can be that long and not 3 or 4 minutes and just bang, bang, bang. Or even why something needs to be that long. Obviously there's sometimes where a band will put together, a huge suite of music, and it's because it's going from one thing to another. There's this progression and you have that feel to it, like it's going somewhere. Sometimes it just seems as though it's just going on and on and on. And it can be beautiful and well produced and well done music and interesting. But when it's all of that stuff and it seems like there's a sense to why it is that long, that's when I really enjoy it, because then you can listen to these long form musical things and really start to understand why they need to be there. The whole deal. It's everything is now in context, and I think listening to more Ahab to know why they do those things so in such a long form way, would go a little bit further for me to understand, what they're trying to do.
Mm.
And then Swallow the Sun, it just seemed much more like they were putting together stuff that could be played more quickly, maybe even on the radio, stuff like that. Let me just pull that up so I can get more context.
Weird fact, The Boats of the Glen Carrig is one of the albums I like to put on some nights and fall asleep to.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not that it's boring, but it's the type of thing where, especially if you have stuff going on in your head, it's music, and different types of music. It can just be that thing that it's sort of like, I understand consciousness as many levels, like maybe, just picture like a 10 level building or structure in your head. And, for some reason on level 3, it's like you can't get out of your own way because you're just, it's your work level, and things just keep happening on that work level. And it's like, oh, did I shut off the bus? Oh, did I leave my thing on the bus? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, and you can't get out of your head. But if you can get something else in that level, or even maybe just like on level 2 and level 4, so sort of surrounding it to like, all of a sudden you can sort of crowd it out. Some people, I guess they can just switch around and be like, or whatever. But I find that sometimes it's just, you need to put something else there. Sometimes it works the wrong way. Like if I'm driving and I put on certain types of music, I'm a worse driver because all the attention and all the detail that I have on that driving level, for whatever reason, that other thing is getting in the way. And now I'm blowing through red, stop signs and, things like that. And I'm like, I can't do that, professionally and in a Christian way. But yeah, I can put on lots of different types of music for different reasons. And, some of them even like very heavy music, you can go to sleep by it.
Before I moved out and got married, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to fall asleep to either Mortification or Soul Embraced.
Soul Embraced. Nice. Yeah. So, I just pulled up, Swallow the Sun. And yeah, their songs, while not, I wouldn't call them short, but they're not the, 10 plus minute songs that you get on like on the other two. Yeah. And also Paul Bearer. But again, these ones, they were more static. And, it was the type of thing where I was trying to understand them, for the songs that they were. And I think I'm past the point in my life musically where I want to be challenged with what a song is trying to say in the plain lyrics. So, for instance, let me see if I can. Okay, Stone Wings, which is the 5th song on the album. And I'm not trying to say any of these songs are bad. I'm not trying to say anything, they're not well done. Every single song was a top quality for that type of music. But lyrically, this one says, speak through the silence, lay down your crown, lay down your fight. Is that fight? Lay down your fight. And when you speak the words of silence, walls will crumble in and skies open. And when you speak with silence. And I carve each word you sing on my stone wings, and the light will pour in. The fires are burning under the starlight, through veils of golden light, the sails so pure, so white. So I'm like, wait a minute. Speak in the silence, and then the silence and the speaking, and then over and over, and then the fires, and then carve each word you speak in silence on the stone wings, and the light will pour in, and then there are sails. And I'm like, it's too much for me to think to myself, oh, this is, it's bringing up all these different things. Wow, it just seems like I can sort of imagine all these things. It's like there's too many things happening, and it doesn't have a logic to it. Lay down your crown, lay down your fight, and then you think to yourself, wait a minute, is this the Crimson Crown that they were talking about in song number 2? Crown. No, it may be, but I mean, even with that one, it's like the Crimson Crown fell. This one was bizarre because the Crimson Crown fell from the blood-red sky through the golden clouds. Out from the crown grew mountains and the skies, which it just fell through. Out from the diamond drops the sea and stars. Okay. Upon the circle shines the all-seeing eye between the earth and the Crimson Crown. And I'm like, this is just, it's making me think of things, but there's no logic to it that just sort of brings you from one thing to another. It just seems like there's a whole lot of words here that they just put down on the page. It's sort of like, hey, I have words. This can be a song. And I mean, and like I said, it's fun to listen to. It's well done, but at the same time, I guess getting to our theme, I want there to be more. Mm-hmm. Even going back to the shooting shark, I bumped inside the magic man and he laid some tricks on me. He said, "You do need help, my friend." I replied, "Obviously." He laid his spread of jacks and queens and bade me take my pick. But every face that had your face, I cried out, "I am sick." And you're like, that's a lot. So you bumped inside a magic man and he played some tricks on. So it's sort of like, is the magic man a place? And maybe the magic man is the person who runs the place. So it's like you went inside the place and then the person who runs the place played some tricks on you. And then it's like you're trying to get to the point where you can get a good visual picture on it. And then what the heck is a shooting shark?
I've been asking that same question.
I'm like, a pool shark? Like a shooting pool shark type of a thing? I mean, I can understand that, but there's nothing about it's just, yeah.
Can let me ask you this. Is subjective lyrics not your jam?
It depends on the lyrics. If they can make sense, that's okay. But, I mean, these lyrics, I defy someone to just read these lyrics and make sense of them. The crimson crown fell from the blood-red sky through the golden clouds. Out from the crown grew mountains and the skies. So there can't be a sky that this thing fell out of if the skies came out of the crown after it fell. It's like, well, unless there's time travel, but there's nothing in here that says anything about time travel. It's sort of like I can take things and run with them as long as they make some sort of sense to them. Like with the shooting shark. Okay, if the shooting shark was a pool shark and he was the shooting shark, they call him the Magic Man. He runs this place called the Magic Man. It's a pool parlor. Okay. If you can think just that, then it starts to make sense, and I can sort of work through that. 3 times since you're back from me, 3 times my bones gone dry. It's a biblical reference right there, kind of interesting. 3 times I've seen the shooting shark lighting up the sky. Maybe, he got famous for shooting pool. But then you're like, well, wait a minute. Who cares if you're having trouble with this woman that the whole song seems to be about? Who cares what the pool shark is doing? At some point, it's like, it sounds good. So that's why we're doing it. And getting past that is difficult for me. Like I would play this song for someone, but I wouldn't say, but listen to the lyrics. There's some songs where I'm like, you could just throw the song away, but listen to the lyrics, and Shooting Shark, it's just more one of those songs where it just sounds good. And the words seem to make some sort of sense, but you lose the sense going through the song. And then when you try to take a look at it and make sense of it, it's not there. These lyrics, like the Crimson Crown lyrics, there's not even that initial sense. They start to contradict within the sentence that it's giving you, and that's where I get a little trouble. Trying to pick out another one. Here's another one. Here on the black earth, you're the island in the sea of time. I'm the ghost ship in the night. In the eye of the storm, you're the lighthouse. I am at the edge of the world, beyond the walls. I'm on the edge of the world. Is there walls at the edge of the world? Is that what it? Or beyond the walls of the lighthouse? It's like it starts to stop making sense, and you're still within the framework of a sentence. That's when it comes
to Swallow the Sun's defense. And I've read their lyrics, and their lyrics come across a little bit jumbled.
Really?
English is not their first language. They are a band from Finland.
Okay. Have they sold thousands of albums?
Not in the US. Actually, their albums are super hard to find in the US. Mm-hmm.
Are they? Have they been around for 10, 20 years?
Time for me to pull up that Encyclopedia Metallum.
Well, I say that because I'm looking at it. They've been recording since 2003. First full-length album came out in 2003. And I think to myself, in 18 years, you could find someone who understands English enough to, at the very least, be there to say, hey, just change this word here. Or, this doesn't make sense to Americans or in English. I understand different languages I don't understand them. I understand that different languages have different senses to them. And I love that about other languages. I love that other languages, you can use them to do things that English can't. As much as English is a fantastic language, there's certain things that other languages can do. Like having male and masculine and feminine words, things like that, where it's like we don't have that in English. Just things simple like that. Digging into wordplay in Japanese when I was learning how to read manga, back in the 80s, I would pick up these books that would translate into readable English, but it would also tell you all the jokes you're missing because you don't read Japanese. And it's like, this person's name, we translated it this way just so you could make sense of it. But every single time that a Japanese person reads this person's name, this is what they think, because the Japanese pictograms and the Chinese pictograms are the same, but they sound different and they mean different things. And sometimes it's a play on words with Chinese. And, seeing how this character is this and that character and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I wish I knew this stuff, but I can't because I'm not enculturated into it. And I understand that. And I love that. But when it comes to putting things out and you're recording it in English, just have someone who knows English and your language, just make it blend, put it together for people who want to get into your music and want to dig into your lyrics. But, having something fall from the sky and then the skies come from it, it's like immediately it's anyone that is going to dig the lyrics is going to have trouble with it, unless it's someone who has some sort of a crazy imagination where that's how they understand things, But anyone who, that's another thing with discernment. It's logic and context. And when you can put things logically and have them in that greater context, that's discernment, And when people take that and don't work within that system, then it can be dangerous. I'm not saying Swallow the Sun is dangerous, but any person who's trying to communicate, I think of what is it? Is it James Joyce, Ulysses, or books like that, where it just starts to get crazy, nonsensical, or, I'm only going to use words that begin with the letter C on this page. And it's for no apparent reason other than the person's whim. It means nothing. So digging into things like that and trying to get something out of it, first of all, it's difficult because there really isn't anything in there to get out of, to pull out of, because it is just a person going through I'm just going to use C's on this page or something. And that's just how they're just processing their creative gift at that point. But for the person who wants to be discerning, who wants to use logic and wants to understand the context of it, it becomes almost like a waste of time to put in the time and energy to try to get that stuff out. I had a friend who loved Led Zeppelin. This is back in the 80s, so, ancient history, but loved Led Zeppelin. And at the time he was struggling with Christianity, but he tried to look at all the things that Led Zeppelin was doing. And admittedly, some of the songs that Led Zeppelin put out have actual Christian applications, because they're borrowing from old blues songs that, have in My Time of Dying, things like that. But he was looking for anything that you could say, okay, I'm going to look at Stairway to Heaven, and, because she's buying a Stairway to Heaven. So she's buying a Stairway to Heaven. So she's, it's works righteousness that she's thinking about here. So, the song is sort of about works righteousness. And as you wind on down the road, our shadow is taller than our soul, because the shadow is Satan, and our soul, he's overcoming it. There's a lady we all know. Maybe that's the Virgin Mary. And, and he was trying to come up with this stuff to make it listenable for him, so he wouldn't have to not listen to Led Zeppelin anymore. And, when you do that, a lot of times it just gets to a point where it's more laughable, and than it is laudable. And it can be the same thing with music. Sometimes I'll listen to a band and I'll say, these people say that they're Christians, and they are putting music out that they say is Christian music, but there's really no beauty to it. There's not even logic to it, and there's not even a context to it. It just seems like a whole bunch of noise. But if you talk to them, they'd be like, oh yeah, we based that on, Psalm 137, or, and it's like, well, how did you get from there to here and feel as though that this was a legitimate way to do that? And, I'm not trying to throw shade at any particular genre of music, because, we're looking at death metal, and there's Christian death metal bands that do it with logic and do it with a beauty to it. Even with death metal or doom metal or, grindcore or whatever, you can do it in a way that's beautiful, as long as you're understanding the whole context of it. Other people aren't going to think that way, because their context is more, well, a harp is beautiful. If you, rubbed something up and down on a harp string just to make it go, that's not beautiful. But if you did that in a rhythm, and you made sure that it was some sort of a musical tone that you were actually going for, then you could do that. And like, people can pluck a violin. That's not what the violin is made for. You don't pluck a violin, but you can, and make it beautiful. Am I talking too much?
No, I'm just listening to what you have to say.
Just going on and on. I know. I didn't want to step on you if you had.
I'll interject if I got something.
Throw in there. Oh, good. Whew. For a second there, I thought it's just me. But for instance, when people think about drums, it's like drums shouldn't be in the church because, drums come from pagan rituals, and, a primitive rhythm machine. That's basically like what a drum is. But I say, what is the most basic thing in the world that keeps a beat?
Right.
The human heart. God made those. You know, it's something that is rhythmical. So inside everybody, inside animals, inside, lots of different things is something that keeps a rhythm, that actually is a timed rhythm that we can look at and say, oh, 70 beats per minute, that's pretty good. 100 beats per minute, you're in trouble, if that's going to be something that's going to be continuing on, and something like that where rhythm isn't bad. It makes sense in that context, and you can see it and you can feel it. And, an electric guitar can be played poorly, can be played unartistically, can be played
I've done all three of those.
And it also can be played probably just tonight too. But just like anything, it can be done poorly. But when you do it with beauty, your intent is to show something beautiful here at some point. And, at the very least, a type of logic that goes along with it and a context for it to exist, then you can sort of say, even though that's not my style, that's okay. We've talked about Sacrament, where you enjoy listening to them. When I hear them, I don't hear a logic to the way that the music is being produced. So when I listen to it, I don't get the same sense that you get out of it, because I'm looking for that logic and not finding it. Driving home, I was like, you know what, just to sort of get a little bit, heavy into my head here, I listened to the first side of their album. Which one is it?
There's only two. It's either Testimony of Apocalypse or Haunts of Violence.
Testimony of Apocalypse. And, I have their cassette from the 80s. I never listened to it because whenever I pick it up, I always remember that that's what I heard before. And I never want to go back to it. And I said, I'm just going to listen to it again with new ears, 21 ears. And, John's found something in here that he enjoys, and I want to give it another chance. So coming home, I'm listening to it, and I'm hearing the exact same things and having the exact same problems that I was having back then when I listened to it back in the 80s when it came out. And it doesn't, for me, there's that lack of logic to the production of it. And as I was listening to it, I'm like, I wish I could pull the things out, because there's some parts of it that are pretty well done and pretty put together. But then it seems like there's some parts where they just threw everything together. I don't know how they recorded it. Sometimes bands get in there and they play everything together. Sometimes they get in there and, each individual person does their part and they layer it on top of each other and stuff. And I'm like, if I could get the layers and then understand them individually, and then maybe even go back in and reproduce the songs the way that I want to hear them, the way that I think that there's a deeper logic to them, then at the very least I could either look at it and say, oh, okay, now I understand why they didn't do that, because I might be wrong. But until I do that, I can only go off of what I'm hearing. And when I hear things not on time, not timed up to each other, and more muddled than I think it needs to be, then I'm still going to have a problem.
Sometimes some of that comes down to what the record label is willing to pay for as well. And given the state that Rex Records was back in the 80s and 90s, they weren't exactly rolling in money. So
no, but they put out some really good albums, and there were some really good bands that came out of Rex. That was one of the labels back then where if Rex put it out as a discerning fan, back to Discernment, you would pick it up because it had that cachet. It was like, Rex, yeah, I'll pick that up. Gurr Records, the record that Crash Dog and Res Band and stuff was off of, that stuff was going to be quality. These are bands that have played together and and done all this stuff before. So the stuff that they put out was like automatically well done. And it was good. You had a bunch of labels like that at the time where you knew that it was going to be a quality album coming out of it. And if for some reason it wasn't, it was sort of suspect. It was like, well, how did that get past the people? So, Rex, with all the problems that they did have, Blonde Vinyl was another one too. Just amazing stuff came out of Blonde Vinyl, but more alternative type feel to it.
I would
But they did
disagree with
some
you
heavy
with
stuff too.
Blonde Vinyl. There was some stuff that came out of theirs that was sketchy as far as production wise.
Anything in particular?
This is the Healing by LSU.
LSU, I love that album.
The album is good. The production on it was awful.
Oh, I'd have to re-listen to it. But I think Plague of Ethels was on Blonde Vinyl, and I had a problem with them. No. Nothing's perfect. But even with that, it wasn't that it was not well produced. It's that
no.
I'm sorry. It's that was the vision that they had, and for some reason it just wasn't aligning with me. Real quickly, do you know who the producer was on the first Sacrament album?
I can look. I have it behind me somewhere. It might take me longer to find it than it would to look it up online, though.
There's like 15 different bands called Sacrament. Wow. Wow, I picked the right one. Testimony of Apocalypse. And let's see if they have any lineup.
Apocalypse. Testimony of Apocalypse is actually released in 1990.
Yep. 1990. Does it say anything about who the producer was?
Looking additional notes. Of course, it's not going to tell me. It tells me what studio it was in. But if I look for lineup, it just tells me who the band was. Oh, here we go. Other staff. Produced by Doug Mann.
See, Doug Mann was one of those guys where if his name was as a producer, you could trust it.
And
so
guess who the two pre-production assistants were on this? You're gonna laugh.
Two pre-production.
Kurt Bachman and Joey Daub. That just hurt your soul.
It boggles my imagination that those people.
For those of you out in listener land who have no idea what two names I just dropped on Steve, those are two members of a Christian thrash band called Believer that Steve just absolutely loves. And whereas I don't dig Believer, and I think at a certain point it also kind of comes down to that there's just some bands that just don't resonate with people like they do with other people. Case in point, I dig Sacrament, you dig Believer, and we're on opposite poles on those bands.
But do you look at Believer and say, I don't think that that it was produced well enough, or are you just like, they're just not my cup of tea?
I listen to Believer and I start picking apart musical bits. Stuff like I don't like what they do here. I don't like their vocals at all on any of their albums.
Really?
And there'll be certain guitar segments, or they'll do some kind of technique where I'll be like, oh, that just feels like they're doing it just for the sake of doing it.
We'll have to do like a listening party or something, and I'll pick out some Believer that I think is like really cool, or what, and you can pick out some that you don't like, and you could sort of trade it back.
The thing is your vocabulary of Believer is vastly different than mine. I had.
Same thing with you and Sacrament.
I had their Sanity Obscure album, and I had one other album of theirs for a very brief period of time, and I just didn't listen to it very much, just because every time I tried to, and everybody just would push Believer down my throat, saying, "Oh, you got it, you got to like Believer," and I tried to force myself into liking it, because there's been some bands I've forced myself into liking. Stavesacre was one of them. Because Mark Solomon's voice wasn't my thing when I first heard them.
Wow.
But, I was able to get myself into Stavesacre, but, as much as I did, it's just, Kirk Bachman's guitar playing, it just felt like he was being flashy for the sake of being flashy, and Joey Dobbs' vocals just was ugh.
Wow. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see where we match up that way.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just really basic when it comes to my thrash, and it's just like I want something a little bit more straightforward.
This Sacrament seems more almost like hardcore to me. Like the way that they delivered their stuff seemed more like if they were a hardcore band than they were like a thrash metal band. But they were put forth as a thrash metal band. So, I think that's sort of what sort of kicked me in the head. Trying to see what they're listed as thrash metal on Encyclopedia Metallum. And I mean, hardcore Christian music, you didn't hear it. I mean, until Tooth and Nail started to really, hammer that type of stuff. Christian hardcore music, what The Lead, I guess, was probably the closest thing you had to something that was more like a hardcore sound. But
well, I mean, you had
even with them,
you had The Crucified,
but they had much more of a punk.
Well, that's what hardcore was.
And flavor. Hardcore and punk, there's a division there. I'm trying to think of a way to put it succinctly, but I think of punk, especially at that time, and this is probably what I would call third wave punk. We could do a whole show on punk, but that punk in the 80s. Right before pop punk had started, we had pop punk back in the late 70s, but when it really started to hit, it was late 80s and then coming forwards. But right before then, you had this third wave punk where you were getting more metal influences. Where I think that's where Crucified sort of. Their second album was basically more metal than it was.
You talking about the self-titled album?
No, that was their first one, right? It was Crucified, and then there was.
Well, no, because they had a series of punk EPs and whatnot they did before they signed to Alarma. On Alarma, when they made the self-titled album, that was when they had made the decision to kind of go more in a thrash direction. And they kind of sealed the deal when they did the Pillars of Eternity.
Pillars of Eternity is what I'm talking about when it's more of the metal that you're hearing than the punk of that their self-titled album. But it's like I said, it's more of that third wave punk that you're getting. You're not getting the Minor Threat feel to it that you would if they were in that second wave, like Minor Threat, second wave punk. And Minor Threat, to their credit as well, they're on the edge of that hardcore sound too. So, from that second wave, it's sort of split into the third wave punk where it's more metal oriented, and then that hardcore punk, which, less commercial sounding, where, you could hear a, Mindbender, on the radio, if you had a radio station that would play any type of music like that, or I don't know. There's a bunch of different songs off of their second album that very much could be played on the radio if you had a hard rock sensibility. With hardcore, very, very little was anything that anyone in hardcore said, "Hey, we should write a pop song." There's not a lot of pop hardcore, and it had that split that I see hardcore going in that completely non-commercial we're just going to stay true to the elements of punk that we feel are most important. And with that third wave, heavy metal inspired punk, it was much more, we're still going to have some song structure. We're going to, have things that rhyme. With hardcore, a lot of the stuff, it doesn't rhyme. It doesn't have to. That's not what it's about. Are we going to put a chorus in this song? No? Okay. And it doesn't matter. It's more about getting that message out and, getting it out with the power and the authority and the influence and all that stuff that you want the music to do. And, that's the medium. But not sure what my point was.
Well, we just kind of did the John and Steve thing and just started kind of chatting about stuff and counterpointing each other. So, but to bring it back to the topic at hand, and specifically the 4 bands, if we were to use discernment in context of I'm a Christian, is this okay to listen to? Where would that verdict fall for you?
That's interesting because you could go song by song. All of these, none of them have an explicit label on them. I didn't find any words that were objectionable. But some of them, it's sort of like, why? And this is a question that I'm asking. I'm not trying to say, this is my judgment on the music, but I would say, why would you take your time and energy to listen to these songs, whatever they are? Boats of the Glen Carrig. Okay, I enjoy literature. I, like to hear something that isn't book length that I get a story out of. That's great. Here we go. Ahab, Boats of the Glen Carrig. And within an hour, you get, pretty much the whole story. If you want to read the lyrics, it actually makes sense. Some of them are a little too growly to actually make sense of. But that's the type of music that you got there. That's what it is. With Swallow the Sun, you're sort of like, well, the lyrics aren't what's going to have any real meaning for you, unless for some reason you just like to have that spaced out, zoned out understanding of, I'm just going to let the words fall where they may and, see if I can pick them up and make something of them. And, if you really want to do that as some sort of a mental exercise, I guess, but it's difficult. The music is much more accessible than Pallbearer or Ahab. So there's that. And with Pallbearer, I think it's more their lyrical direction that they're, the ghost that I used to be, Watcher in the Dark. They're sort of, if you have stuff going on in your life that is making you write dark lyrics and dark poetry and things like that, probably isn't the best thing to record them. Even if people want to hear that type of stuff, it's not like they need to hear it. There's that type of a feel to it. Let me see if I can pull something up real quick. Won't Swallow the Sun. Encyclopedia Metallum.
Don't want Swallow the Sun. That doesn't make sense to me.
All right, Watcher in the Dark. Torn through the veil, corporeal vessel left behind into formless void, branching web of space and time, wandering away, wandering deeper inside. Endless open wound, swirling mass, 10 billion eyes, dismal cosmic tomb, spines licking astral mind. Wandering away, wandering deeper inside, endless and obscure, the Watcher in the Dark, in the sea of illusion, a voyage to beyond, within. It's vivid. You sort of understand what he's going for, but at the same time, you're like, is there a Watcher in the Dark with 10 billion eyes? No. I mean, not in any real sense. So it's like, was this a dream that he had? Was it just something where it's like, hey, I have this cool idea for a horror, thing? Is it does it, going back to, does it have that beauty? Does it have logic? Does it have context? This Watcher in the Dark, I mean, is it from a Lovecraft story? Is it something that he made up? There's no context to it. The words, even though they seem to be describing the same thing, that's the only logic that you can really get out of it. Is it beautiful? The words themselves, I would probably have to say no, because it's referring to this weird thing, and it's just, there's no, in context, looking at the logic of it, there's no beauty to the lyrics. So, I would say with Paul Bearer, and this is me just picking apart random lyrics, so don't, take this to the bank or anything like that. But when it comes to things like this, look at it and say, why do I put time and effort into this music? I know some people, and some people very close to me, when they create, they will listen to songs where it might not be their favorite song. The song itself might not even be very good, but they might take a song like this and say, this is going to be the villain or the big bad guy in my story, or in my whatever it is. So when I listen to this song, I'm going to have that feel to it, that these words are going to inform my story, because I want the big bad guy to be like this. And that can make sense, so you can have a bad song, or songs that quote unquote have bad lyrics or negative lyrics or whatever, but you're using it in a way that informs something else that you're using to create something hopefully much brighter, something that has much more spiritual beauty.
It's funny that you say that, because it was actually when we were doing the first season of Playing Games with Strangers, and I was coming up with the storylines as we were going, I was actually listening to a lot of Swallow the Sun and Paul Bearer throughout that whole thing. And in fact, you had cracked wise on me a couple times about Paul Bearer and the Swallows of the Sun.
That's me.
So, in the way you're describing it there, I'm like, yeah, that's literally what I did with it when I first started listening to it.
Yeah. I mean, these things are out there. It's not like Paul Bearer is going to listen to this podcast and say, oh, we're going to hunt down all the copies of our albums and take them back. So this stuff is out there. As a Christian, as a discerning Christian, I want to limit myself in the ways that spiritually help me. Okay. Listening to these songs, because they were all non-explicit, that helped me, because I didn't have to think, I have to mute this part of the song, or I have to not listen to this one song or whatever. So discerning wise, that helped. Listening to these songs gave me a better sense of different things that I didn't have before coming into it. So it did help. But it's sort of like when I drive my school bus, sometimes the kids will want to listen to certain music. And I have a list that on my Spotify list on my phone that I play. And it's curated. It's the songs that I've found that personally I can put up with, because a lot of them are pop songs. But the song lyrics aren't offensive. The theme of the song isn't anything that's offensive, or I tried my best. And also that the artist isn't someone who's a spokesperson for anything negative. So if the kid goes home and says, "Oh, we listened to," this wouldn't happen, but Slayer on the bus, but it was a really nice song, and I wouldn't do that, because Slayer has certain stances at the very least, they are vocal about certain things that I have nothing good to say about. So I would stay away from that completely. And there are some, I won't get into it really because it's completely other topic, but there are some just regular pop stars who I just do not play on the bus because of what they stand for in their life, because of stances that they've made, political or whatever. Most of the time it's personal, interpersonal choices that they've made or support. But I just want to completely eliminate that, and move on. So and when kids come up with a song, it's like, oh, but how come we can't listen to that? And I say, it's because of this reason or that reason or the other reason. And I say, but there are millions of good songs. Let's find those and let's put those on the list so no one will be offended. So no one will go home and accidentally sing the wrong thing, and then no one can listen to any music on the bus. I say there are some really great songs out there. Let's find them. And with these songs, I don't know if I would put any of them into the category of the really great songs. Not because they're musically not well done, but because the lyrics don't carry it to that point. Even the Boats of Glencarrig, it's one of those stories where if you look at it, it is basically documenting a thing that happened. And you can look into it and you understand that it's written 150 years after the fact that that it was supposed to have happened. So that type of a feel to it, but the lyrics to the songs don't convey the theme of the story as well as the actual story does. So not having that theme to go on would be the thing that would detract me from that. Even though you could listen to the album and then want to go to the story and then get the theme, it's still, why not write the song and then just have one extra song that talks about the theme, or just have each song, hit that theme. The theme is important when it comes to writing and when it comes to people writing things. One of the things that I hammer on is theme, because you can have a story that's the words are handcrafted and the plot is just fantastically tooled to it's everything is just so cool, and there's just no connecting theme to it, and it just seems like, here's the story and there it goes up into the air because it has no weight, and it's just, the theme is the thing that people are going to remember. Why is the first Star Wars movie called A New Hope? Because that's the theme. They're just smacking you across the face.
For a moment there, in my
theme.
tired stupor, I thought you were about to start talking about the first Star Trek movie, and I'm like, there's no theme to the first Star Trek movie.
There actually is, but we're not going to get into that right now. But if it's not about the motionlessness of it, but when you look at a theme, that's what is going to carry the story. That's hopefully, typically, what someone would carry from a good song, from a good story, a good movie. When all you can remember is the big fight scene, it's like, it's not it to me. When the Bible talks about finding things that are excellent, and focusing on those things, a lot of times that's what I'm looking for. There's plenty of good, but what is excellent? And I guess I probably could have come up with the Bible verse before we started the show.
It's fine, dude. So, but I think through context of everything we've discussed, I think we've really tapped on some good methods of discernment when it comes to music as a Christian and what we put before ourselves. And in a lot of cases, I think it's fairly subjective as far as, what you're willing to take, what you are okay with taking in. I mean, obviously there should be some standards as far as not taking in anything that is objectively against what you believe, because that is just,
Yeah.
that's kind of a given. Where as much as I do on a surface level enjoy listening to bands like Slayer, I also always walk away from those experiences feeling a little bit slimed, you know, just because they do have songs like Jesus Saves, which is the punchline to that is the no one is the implied response to that, or haunting the chapel or stuff like that. So
Yeah. So Philippians 4:8, if you can just make a checklist, this would be fantastic, because it says, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I would say the more boxes you tick, the better it is spiritually for you. So if you're listening to Slayer and say they have excellent production, hey, if there's any excellence, think on these things. They are masters of their instruments. They're worthy of praise because they have mastered those instruments. Okay, those are two boxes that you can check. But is what they're saying true? No. Is it honorable? No. Is it just? No. Is it pure? No. Is it lovely? No. Is it commendable? No. So, hey, they have two boxes that they checked.
mm-hmm.
So if you use it as a checklist, Philippians 4:8, that is going to take you a long way in discernment. And then look at each thing on that checklist, because you might say, hey, well, what about this song? Is it true? Do things haunt the chapel? I mean, maybe that it's, I don't even know what the lyrics are, but find out what the words mean, and then you can better discern what these things really are, if they really fall into those categories. Like, people use the word pure nowadays as, oh, that thing is pure, but it could be something filthy. They're just using the word pure to refer to it, and it's they're corrupting the word, and we need to take that back. Wayne's World, Party Time, excellent, probably not excellent. So try to look at the words, understand what they really mean biblically, and work it out that way. And then, these things will start to be more clear to you. Look at things like themes, because sometimes, like for instance, Paul Bearer, they have some dark themes. They might not use filthy language, but if you're listening to it and you're more susceptible to dark thoughts, if you're getting dark words in your head, there's plenty of other stuff out there. It goes without saying, Christian bands. If you're getting negative stuff from Christian bands, don't listen to them. There's so many, like I said, excellent things out there. Find them.
All right. Well, I think that's actually a good spot to end on. Do you have any final thoughts before we close this down, Steve?
All of those thoughts.
No, I'm just
good enough.
I should have expected that after I said it. I really should have. Do you want to give each other homework bands or a homework assignment like we used to do?
Ooh, let's see. Yeah. Have you heard? Man, let's see if I can pull this up real quick. Have you ever heard Luxury?
No.
Luxury. Trying to think if they were a Tooth and Nail band. but their first album is one of my, well, I won't tell you. Either it's one of my favorite albums or one of the albums that I may have had a problem with. You never know. But if you can listen to their first album, which is called Amazing and Thank You.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and message that to me.
Find it for you. It's check it out.
I am just checking to make sure you have access to what I'm about to recommend to you before I recommend. Move faster, phone. Oh, my phone's going to be disagreeable with me.
We can edit this in post. It'll be a 20 minute episode.
We can carve this episode up into 6 episodes. Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch gears because I was going to go the metal route, but I think we've been touching metal a bit too much. So I'm going to direct you to an album by a rapper I've been listening to pretty much nonstop for the past day and a half. And I've actually mentioned this album to you in our personal conversations. Rapper's name, Paradox. Album is called Grayscale. It is on Spotify. It's also currently Name Your Price on Bandcamp if you should choose to download it and own it.
That's cool.
And I
Gray with an A or an E. And
I put it on at youth group last night, and one of my youth students, they looked at me like, "Did you just put on Eminem?" I'm like, no. And for the eagle-eyed listeners out there, you will recognize, if you decide to listen to these albums with us, you'll recognize this as a lot of the background music on the Supersonic Pod comics.
Nice.
So
check that out.
If you want,
DJ Sean.
So if you want to hear, our responses to our homework, you got to tune in for our next episode, which I'm hoping will be next month, when we'll have both of us in tow then, and we'll have another topic that we've got locked and loaded. And if I have my druthers, we might have a guest with us next episode as well. So, but we don't need to dive into that right now because I haven't gotten a confirmation as of yet. But he said he's interested, so no.
Steve Rowe?
Gosh, if I had Steve Rowe on, I'd probably be like shouting it from the rooftops. So,
and hey, Steve Rowe, if you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on a show. I mean, we named this after one of your albums and songs. So if anyone knows,
and
Steve
in fact,
Rowe,
if Steve Rowe decides to be on the show, I am willing to stay up until 3 a.m. when it's a decent hour for him. So
yeah, it's almost 3 a.m. for me.
It's like 1 for you right now.
Yeah, which is like 3. It's an odd number.
Well, anyway, for those of you out there listening, thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and you got something from it. If you got any suggestions, feel free to make contact with us via the Geek Devotions Facebook page, as well as if you're on the Geek Devotions Discord channel. We have a channel on there as well. And above all,
you could just come up to us in person.
Well, don't do that with me, please. I have anxiety. But above all, we are the music division of Geek Devotions, a podcasting and streaming ministry dedicated to letting you know that you are loved. So if you get nothing else out of the show, understand that you are loved. So with that said, we will catch you next time. Goodbye, everybody.